Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ground Control Podcast. I am Patrick Rife, and I am so thrilled that you are here today to join me for another edition of this podcast. As you know, we grapple with all things wide-eyed, truth-telling, entrepreneurial, creator, builder, founder, do your own thingishness here. And today is going to be no different. So again, thank you for tuning in. It's your first time hearing us. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that way you get notified each time we publish a new episode. But without further ado, let's get into this week's content. So this week's edition of the Ground Control Podcast is going to follow up on the previous, which was actually 2 weeks ago when we talked about releasing IdeoLoop. For anyone that hasn't checked it out yet, IdeoLoop is the app that I built to help founders and creators and other business people stop writing and start talking. So the thesis behind the app is that we've all got great stories to tell, interesting stories to tell, relevant stories to tell. But when we sit down and we're looking at the white page and we need to write that content out, it's oftentimes crickets. So what I did was I built a tool that acts as your interviewing partner, and it helps you pull all of those rich, juicy stories out. And then once it's done doing that, it crafts it into compelling, optimized social media content for you. So that being said, what I want to talk about today is what it was like to launch IdeoLoop and what comes after that, right? So I think that in this time in our lives where we are, what we're going to start seeing more and more of is the ability to build something and get it out there. I think that there will always be people that are building too much, that are doing too much, that are overbuilding and they're not shipping enough. But I also think that we'll start to see people ship more and still not have success, because with the onslaught of AI assisted coding tools that are taking total nobodies like yours truly and allowing them to build pieces of technology and software and applications, it means that barrier to entry to crank something out and to get it live is getting lower and lower and lower every single day. However, just building some piece of AI schlock software is not the same thing as building something, scaling it, and then selling it for a ton of money, or building something and having it go to a $50,000 a month application. And I think that's what we're hearing so much. Like all the talking heads that are out there in the space are very much all in on just like, people are building, solopreneur businesses that will, reach billion-dollar valuations. And while I don't think that is completely unfounded, I do think that there's a lot more to meets the eye than just taught myself how to code over the weekend, launched an app on Monday, I'm rich by Thursday. There's a lot that comes in between there. And I think that one of those things that I want to highlight on, particularly as it pertains to IdeoLoop, is what does launch mean and then what comes after that? So for me, launch just meant I finally am going to acknowledge that this thing exists. I've been whispering to friends and colleagues about, I'm building this thing. I think that it's cool. And I'd let a few people, take it for a spin, but I hadn't really gotten into putting it out there yet. So I think that like the idea of launch can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Specifically for me, what it meant was now I can talk about this out loud. As anybody that follows along with me here knows, I do a lot of things, and it's very intentional that I do a lot of things. One, because I'm a creative person and it would drive me crazy to not let those ideas see the light of day. But two, because I personally feel that my desire and the work that I spend working on lots of different projects and different ideas, I think that they all make one another better, right? So I think that if I were only doing one or two things, the richness with how I'm doing them wouldn't be as intense without these other projects adding context. But I also say that because for me, when I am when I'm trying to get light to these projects that I have, when I'm trying to get attention onto them, I do that by recording podcasts, right? I do that by writing content and publishing it onto LinkedIn. I do that by writing my weekly newsletter and publishing it out to my subscribers. And something that I didn't get right the first time when I was doing ground control was figuring out how to tell multiple stories simultaneously. For me, it was very much like one was taking up all the light, and then none of the rest of them could breathe. So this time around, I very intentionally wanted to make sure that there was a thread that connected all of my different projects together, and not like a thread that's kind of like, well, I kind of see how that could be relevant. More so a thread that was like, I'm doing this here because it complements this and then this and this connect these other ecosystems of ideas together. So for me, launching IdeoLoop was giving myself permission to start to talk about it in my own personal, very small and modest ground control publication channels. That is not the be all end all of what launching it actually means, right? Like, I launched it to my world of people to be able to talk about it, what I have in mind for how I'm actually launching it, right? What it means to get users for an application. And then once you get users, to get feedback. And then once you get feedback, to say, what would you pay for it? And then once you get through all of those things, right, then can you start to say, okay, how would I charge for this? What would that look like? But I've got to go through those gaps first. For me, those gaps are a beta cohort. So right now I am in the process of rounding up the beta cohort of users that are going to help me understand what about this thing is cool, what about this thing sucks, what could be better, what would really change the game if it were there, versus I don't care about that thing that you built in there at all. All of that user feedback is what's going to make IdeoLoop actually a real thing, right? So when we're talking about that barrier to entry, right? Like, now anybody that has the desire can code something. But the question is, can you code something? Can you get it out there and get people using it so that way you can build that feedback into what you're building to make it better? Can you package it up? And then the big one, can you actually sell it, right? It's not enough just to make a product. You have to get light on that product. You have to get feedback on that product. You have to get dollars onto that product. If any of those things don't fall into place, you're going to have a much harder time actually doing something. So it's funny, like, I'm thinking about it, like, what were my expectations of the launch, quote unquote? To be like straightforward with you, they were very low, because for me, again, I just wanted it to get out there into the universe and hear some feedback from it. But I think that I approached launching IdeoLoop with a very specific expectation. And I don't think that that expectation is all that common for other people and what they should expect. And I think that part of the reason is that people don't know what to expect. They haven't, oftentimes we get excited about an idea, we create an idea and we're like, oh, tons of people want to use this. We haven't done the research, right? So then when you create a product without an audience or without a reason for it to exist, then anything that you might expect is very much open to speculation, right? And I think on the other side of that, without saying, here's my hypothesis, right? Like, I built this for this person, and my hypothesis is they're going to use it this way, and I'm going to know if that hypothesis proves to be true or false based on this or that. And after I get through that channel of testing and auditing and gathering information, I'm going to read the tea leaves, and then I'm going to apply it this way and start the whole thing over again. I think that unless you're approaching your product with very specific expectations of what you're trying to learn, right? With very specific expectations of, I'm going through this sprint, and this sprint is designed to help me determine if it's this way or if it's that way. Based on when I get that feedback, I'm going to either make this change or I'm going to make that change, and then we're going to go and do it again. Like, that iterative thought process is something that I think we too often, when we're excited about building a product, we rush through it. And if we're rushing through it, we're going to continue to see significant problems with how our expectations get fulfilled with what did that launch actually mean. So I guess maybe the statement is, what does launch mean to you and what do you want it to accomplish? We need to be making sure that we're defining that before we go into it, right? Before we put a name on it, because plenty of people would say that launch is not what I did at all. And I think that that is a very fair statement. Probably speaks more to, this thing is available, you can buy it, we're going to start to ramp it up. For me, it was just a little bit of a different definition for how I was getting there. So like, now let's move into the phase of this where I've gotten it out there and, what is the feedback? What does it resonate? I'm excited to say that the feedback has been really, really strong. Like a lot of people saying a lot of things that I don't believe, like, this is a game changer, or it has done this for me, or it has done that for me. And I don't believe it because a lot of those early people that I've reached out to ask to check it out, like they're known entities, right? They are friends, they're colleagues, they're people that I know who I know want the best for me. And that is worth highlighting for a second. You have to be very careful when you're testing your product for feedback with who you ask, because it's very hard to get honest answers from people who care about you, because they want you to succeed, because they don't want your feelings to get hurt, for all of the reasons. And those are wonderful reasons for people to do what they do for you. Those are not wonderful pieces of actual real feedback for what's going on with your product, because it's dangerous, right? If somebody tells you that everything is peachy keen because they can't even see the forest for the trees because they just want to do well for you, then you're going to miss stuff. Then you're going to go in with a erroneous set of data telling you what to do next. There's no room for that hubris when you're building your product. When you're building your product, what you need is clean, decisive feedback. So I think that that's like another thing. If this episode is focusing on what is a launch, when to launch, why to launch, and what the fuck are you trying to accomplish with launching, this would be a dissertation in that conversation, right? Like, be critical of who you're learning from. Realize that they're not owned. Sorry, not that they're not owned, but ideally, they shouldn't be from your world. You should be looking for people that are ideal users of the tool that you can get to give you really straight answers, that don't have a dog in a fight. Like, they don't know you, but they would use the tool and they are willing to use it. That's the data that you really want. If you can get a perfect stranger telling you that this is a game changer and why it's a game changer, and they continue to use it. That's the other thing. If somebody tells you it's a game changer, and gives you a bunch of reasons, but you can look inside of your application and they're not using it, that's probably advice that you should disqualify. Which leads me to the next comment that I want to make here in this world of launching something is, how are you measuring it? Like, part of that measurement is user feedback directly, right? We can send them questionnaires, surveys, we can get on a call, we can do a screen share, we can do all of these things. We can put them in a learning group with 10 other users and let them have a consensus around what's going on. The other side of it is, what are the data points that are actually happening that are irrefutable, right? What's beautiful about data is that it's irrefutable as long as it's captured and categorized appropriately. So again, if you're building an application or some sort of or web tool or something along those lines, figure out, like, what is the most primary action someone does in your tool? What is the second most primary action someone does in your tool? You can probably leave it there, right? Because, like, there's no new tool that is doing 10 things for people that is the reason why it's amazing. Any new tool that you're building, anything that you're building that is generating emphatic users, or just like whatever, benign users, they're coming back for one single feature. They're not coming back for 3 features. They're probably not coming back for 2 features. They're probably coming back for one thing that you do really, really well. And your job is to, through their use, through their feedback, through what they're doing, determine what that thing is, right? That's the signal. Your whole job is, how do I hone in on the primary signal that is coming out of this tool that I'm trying to figure out? Everything else is noise in that moment. So part of figuring that signal out is that you learn to ask better questions. So when you are having those one-on-one with users, when you are sending them surveys, those questions are getting better. They're getting sharper. They're getting more to the point of what you're trying to determine. On the other side, what are the actual actions inside of the tool or the software that prove or disprove that primary thing that you're trying to look at? So, whether we're talking about Google Analytics, whether we're talking about, like your little vibe coded thing that you just vibe coded up, and you're trying to figure that out, like, is there a dashboard, right? If you created that dashboard with a simple, SQL database using something like Supabase to make sure that every user that's using it has their own user profile. And then from there, like, what's beautiful about this vibe coding world that we're in is that you're now able to say, oh, hey, I want to create a database to be able to track all of this stuff, but also, like, I want to know every time person X does thing Y, right? Or I would need to know every time person X does thing Y and thing Z. With surprising competency, it can build that in there for you, right? So no longer are we at a place where you have to be able to get data back, you have to figure out Google Analytics, or you have to buy these additional analytics tools and install them and heat maps and all of that stuff. Now you're at a place where, as long as you can identify what that thing is that you want to measure and describe it with your words well to your Lovable or to your Base 44 or to your Claude Code instance, that can be taken care of for you. So again, figuring out what is that primary signal, right? What is the signal? How do we ask our users about it with words? How do we extract the data for what that signal gets measured by inside of the analytics of our tool? Those are the two very, very secret special levers that we want to learn how to pull when we're going through our launch or our beta or whatever it is that you want to call it. So one of the things I think is worth mentioning is what surprised me out of it. And that thing was, quite honestly, it was a lot of crickets. And that is because there's no audience that is built for this thing yet, right? My audience is at this place where they lurk a lot, right? They're listening, they're being inspired by me putting myself in uncomfortable situations and trying to build things I have no business building. And I think that's all well and good, but that is not necessarily the audience of users that I need for this. But that's okay. And let me tell you why. I have a variety of different projects that I'm working on. I have a very niche specific marketing agency that I have been building. I have IdeoLoop that I have been building. I have the ground control platform that I have been building. And really, this podcast, right? This my newsletter, all of this stuff is exclusively about building things, right? Like, this thing exists to talk about the process of building things, to talk about the process of building things that reflect who you are, to talk about the process of following your gut. So for me, again, launching IdeaLoop, I had no expectation that it was going to drive a bunch of signups. I didn't even think that it was going to drive people being like, hey, I want to try that out, because I knew, and quite frankly, based on what I said previously, like, I didn't give a shit about that. Like, I don't need a bunch of people who love my writing and love listening to the podcast and the way that I talk about things to be trying this thing out. I didn't build it for people who love my content to use. I built it for people who struggle with capturing their own story and getting it out there and turning it into their own content. So I knew very well that my goal was a very streamlined strategy for building my beta cohort of users, right? Like, and it wasn't publishing this on ground control. Publishing this on ground control was 100% about me telling my story. So I don't know, like, I guess it was kind of surprising, and it kind of wasn't. And ultimately, like, I'm A-okay with all of it. I think that one of the things that was really interesting about it was that it shook me a little bit, because I almost worried that IdeaLoop even after I had recorded the whole episode, I worried that IdeoLoop wasn't ready for what we were doing, and I kind of hedged my bets a little bit, and I ended up with a little bit of a stumble for 2 weeks, publishing inconsistently, right? Because I let the doubt get into my head, right? I let the second guessing get into my head, which is really funny because I had kind of like been building up to wanting to do that episode, but you know, and I think that this is probably like a great way for us to wrap this week's podcast up, is talking about doubt. It doesn't matter how great of things you've accomplished and how underwhelming things you've accomplished. There will always be doubt. There will always be imposter syndrome. There will always be something in you saying that you're not enough. And there will also always be a part of you that is saying that you are enough. You are enough, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to grapple with those feelings, right? Like, you don't have to just crush imposter syndrome. Like, it's there for a reason and it plays a role. And the most important thing is to not ignore it, right? Don't ignore it. Don't pretend like it's not a thing. Give it its space. Come to peace with it, make a plan for how to get by it, and then you keep moving, right? It took me a little bit of time to figure out, okay, like, how should I move past this? What should I do about it? Do I even need to acknowledge it, right? Like, so many times the things that we tell ourselves is the status quo outside in the world is not the status quo outside in the world. We always think that everyone knows about what we're up to or what we've been doing, or that we dropped a ball, or that, like, we didn't do something the way that we said we were going to do it, or we didn't get the results that we thought we were going to get. But the reality is, like, almost no one is ever really paying attention. And you're the one putting those expectations on yourself. And I think that that's completely fine. But I also think that it's worth acknowledging that we are our own harshest critics, which is good because it keeps us tight, keeps us lean, keeps us doing cool shit. But also, don't let it keep us from shipping, right? Ship something. Like, just ship it and post about it and get it out there. Because, like, what I promise you is that thing that you've been like coding on and fooling around with, like, none of your peers are doing that. And they just want to, like, they want to gas you up for it. Like, they think it's cool too. And you're worried you're going to get judged for it. But, like, shipping it, getting it out there can be a huge game changer. Like, will it make you a millionaire? Probably not. Will it make you more likely to ship the next cool idea that you have? Definitely. Will shipping a second cool idea after your first one bring you closer to doing something like that? Absolutely. It's all in the iterations. The iterations are what we do over and over and over again. And that's what, like, I call bullshit on hustle culture. I call bullshit on founder entrepreneurship culture. I call bullshit on all of that stuff. I've said this from the very beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. I've always, like, I come from a background of being a musician, making a little bit of art, but always a project, always working on something, always tilling the dirt, because I was just curious. My relationship with entrepreneurship has been no different than that. It's just curiosity. I just continue to pull back the layers of the onion to see what's there. And time again, it shows me something interesting that is worth my time. It shows me something interesting about the world that I'm living in, and it shows me something interesting about myself. And what I try and do each and every time is to take all of that data, all of that input, all of that feedback that the world is giving me, that people are giving me, that I'm giving myself, and I package it up into the next dance that I'm going to go into, and I see where it leads me. So that's it. Look, if this is you, if any of this resonated, please leave a comment. I love to read them. I try to respond to every single one. If you're building something and you want some feedback on it, DM me the URL, send me the link. I'll check it out. I'll give you feedback. If you want to try IdeoLoop, DM me, or you can go to IdeoLoop.ai. That's where you can sign up to find out more about it. We are continuing to build on the Baltimore creators tip. So if this is you, Baltimorean, listening to the podcast today, I would highly encourage you to head over to baltimorecreators.com. Make sure that you get on the list. We're now sending out a weekly newsletter with cool, fun tech things to do in Baltimore. But we're still planning for our first round of Builder Fridays whenever that happens. I have no shame about when it's going to happen. First, you got to build up the list. So we're doing that now. Listen, share this podcast with someone that you love. Share it with someone that you think needs to hear it. If you are in Baltimore, share Baltimore creators with organizations, entrepreneurs, anyone you know. We want all of you in the room with us. I'm Patrick Rife. This is the Ground Control Podcast. I appreciate you all so much. I will see you next week.